It's about 7 a.m. on Monday, July 17th, 2023. And as you can see, I'm standing in the middle of a bunch of goatweed. And you might get a little concerned if you look at it this way. But then if you turn down and look at the ground, you can see that there's still grass growing down there and things. That the goatweed really isn't causing that many problems. So, yeah, because there's lots of grass down there. Anyway, yeah. And then also if I just move a little bit here, I get to a spot where there's not much goatweed at all. Look at that grass growing. I don't know what kind of grass that is, but I like it. Seems to be a fairly aggressive sort of grass that grows quickly. The cows like to eat it. And the old areas where I had them, they cut it down pretty good. So this is the duck pond now. I still got the ducks behind the net, but they come out whenever they want to. I left an opening for them. They expect me to go feed them. I'll feed them tonight. Hey there, Mr. Bo. It's quite dewy this morning. The temperature is like 75-ish, somewhere around there. Pretty humid, but my pants are soaking wet from the dew. You can see the dew glisten on the plants here. So this is our last stop in this section. Tonight we're going to move them to the next section. So, here's the sheeps. Hello, 18. We did some fence investigation repairs. We found a couple places where the electric wire had wrapped around the barbed wire. It's an easy fix, but it's annoying nonetheless. So, grass is here up to my knees. It's just fantastic grass. Let's go look at the back 20. Yeah, I really can't ask for more grass than this. I can imagine it could get better, but it's hard to imagine. I certainly don't want to, what's the right way to put it? Seem ungrateful for the many blessings I've received, I guess, is what I'm saying. I think this year's been a fantastic year so far. Just looking at my cows, how much weight they put on. So this is the northern section of the back 20. I gotta close that gate. Oh well. I tell you what, it didn't look like this 3 weeks ago before the cows came in. They sure flattened everything. That's what I want them to do. Eat all they can and flatten the rest. I don't want grass hanging up in the air. Especially dead grass. So I made the comment, I don't know if I made it on video yet, but if you were to come to my field in late June, I think, it would look all brown because the spring grass by that time had already died. And you could see little bits of that spring grass left. But now the predominant color is green because of all the things that are growing. And the nice thing about this area is that we have a long summer. So this grass should keep growing all the way, almost up to October, if not into October. Assuming the temperatures stay warm through September, which they usually do. Usually we have a nice long summer that goes through September. I know everybody's hyping up this heat wave. It's ridiculous. If you look at the historical records, the 1920s before the Dust Bowl, that was a record heat wave in the United States. And If you look at longer term records, the Earth used to be warmer than it is right now. We're still in an ice age. And it wasn't so long ago, actually, that we had a warmer Earth. They used to grow grapes for wine up in England and Scotland. And I ask you if that's even something anybody would consider, given the climate the way it is up there. It used to be much warmer. And during those periods of warmth, that's when human populations exploded and civilizations flourish. It's when the earth starts to cool off that the rain stops falling and farming becomes harder, and things don't go as well. That's once it started to cool off in the Little Ice Age, they call it, in the medieval period. That's when all the plague started. And people were watching the glaciers take their farmland, the glaciers from the Alps. You couldn't do much about that. And of course, they weren't able to grow grapes anymore up north. So, yeah. If the earth is warming, which I hope it is, that would be a very good thing. Unfortunately, the data says it's not warming. So those temperatures we saw in that warm period in medieval times is probably not coming back anytime soon. Back in the 70s, when I was young, everybody was worried about the coming ice age. That the earth was going to be covered in ice. And of course that never materialized. Nowadays they talk about climate change because they can't say global warming because everybody's onto their game. Climate change. The temperatures are going to change by some minuscule amount that's not even noticeable. And somehow it's all our fault. So I once did a calculation. How much, like if we wanted to poison the ocean with cyanide, how much cyanide would we need to produce to just poison the top inch of the ocean to such a point that it would be considered unsafe to drink? Right? Not even the amounts that would actually kill somebody, but the amounts to make it unsafe to drink because of cyanide, right? And so if we took our entire oil consumption and dumped that much cyanide into the ocean every year, how many years would it take for us to poison the waters until it's unsafe to drink due to cyanide? And the answer is like a couple thousand years or something like that. Right? So a couple thousand years of dumping the amount of oil that we consume in cyanide, right? So oil is not like cyanide. It's not going to cause the same damage. That's ridiculous, right? So, of course, if you were to say, well, what about the entire ocean, the entire mass of the ocean? And that number becomes even more ridiculous. I was just looking at the top inch. You know, if somehow we're able to keep the cyanide on the top inch of the ocean. The point is people's sense of scale is broken. If you live anywhere near a city, you think that that's like the entire world. It's covered with streets and stoplights and apartment buildings. And the minute you zoom out, you start to see that there's vast areas of the earth where hardly anybody lives, you know. Here in Texas, where I'm standing, is probably one of the lower density places in the country. But even here, it's more people are living here per square mile than probably on most of America. Like most of the land in America has fewer people living per square mile than's living here. And you might ask, how is that possible? The answer is that America is huge. It's unimaginably huge. And that's just the US, and there's other countries too that are huge. Russia has vast amounts of land. China has vast amounts of land. South America, Brazil, Argentina, you know. People's sense of scale is broken. They look around their immediate area and they think this is what the entire planet looks like. And they don't really truly appreciate, like, even if you were to get in a car and drive across one of our interstate highways, you wouldn't really understand how sparsely populated America is, because the highways are surrounded by civilization on both sides, right? Just like the railroad tracks, when we built railroads across the West, towns would spring up along the railroad tracks. Everywhere there's a stop, there'd be a little town, right? Our freeway system is like that too. The places that I'm talking about are places you can't get to by any kind of road, not even dirt roads. And if you were to find some kind of road out there, you'd be in the middle of huge amounts of land where probably nobody's walked for hundreds of years, like nobody. A lot of times we have designated them as national parks or forests or different things like that. But there's vast amounts of land that are untouched in this country. And I think it's a shame. I really do. I think that we should open up those lands and allow people to settle it, especially young people. Do what we did back in the 1800s, and you know, if you build a little house and a fence and you live there for a year, it should be yours. Maybe we put conditions on, like you can't sell it for 20 years or something like that. Or if you do sell it, it has to be to another person that has a similar family. You know, you can't join the land together. So that, you know, I think that's something that we should look at in this country, is opening up the vast amounts of area that are unsettled. Now, granted, most of that land, the reason why nobody's there is because the land is useless. It's utterly useless for anything, you know. But I imagine using more modern farming techniques that don't involve dumping chemicals on your property. Probably some more ingenious people will figure out a way to make it arable. We did take the prime real estate, you know, the stuff that's really easy to farm, a long time ago. But with like dams that we've been building and other things that we can build, we should be able to reclaim most of the land. Or not reclaim, but claim most of the land, you know. So even out there in the West, where everything in the West is a desert, it just, compared to this, it's a desert. In terms of the amount of rainfall they get and stuff like that, like even in the more rainy parts of the West, it's just a ridiculously low amount of rain that they get. But the nice thing they do have is they have mountains, and those mountains have glaciers, and those glaciers melt in the summer. And so they could capture that water and repurpose it, you know, send it to the ground, build up the underground water supply. And then places like Death Valley used to be a garden, but now it's a giant desert because the water level has been lowered. Arizona has the right idea. What they do in Arizona is, if you pull out a gallon of water from the ground, you have to pump a gallon of water back down. You know, that's the right way to do it. Something like that. Out here in Texas, we're standing on top of huge, I forget what they're called. There's like huge oceans of water underneath the ground. And we could tap into that water and take as much as we want. It would just refill. It refills as fast as we drain it, so we don't have to worry about putting water back under the ground. But in places like Arizona, where it doesn't rain as much and where there's not a lot of opportunity for the water to get underground, they definitely have to pump it down to keep the water level up, you know. And they could even do things like pump more water down than they take out, raise the water layer, and then you know, the trees should be able to access it. You should be able to grow trees everywhere. And I don't know if you guys know this about how plants work, but one of the things they do is they suck water out of the ground and they spit it out of their leaves. They're like little sprinklers. The reason why they do that is that's how they get the nutrients from the soil, is they have to suck it up and spit it out like a straw. And so anywhere there's plants, the humidity goes up. And so if you had a bunch of trees growing in Arizona, the humidity would rise, and if the humidity rose, you might get things like rain. So there was a video I watched where this farmer in Mexico, in northern Mexico, was talking about how he's doing rotational grazing. He has like 10,000 acres or some crazy amount of land, which sounds like a lot, but when you look at the land that he has, it's really not that much, because it's pure desert. It's just pure desert. But he said that using rotational practices not only like increases the yield of how much grass he gets in a year, but also, and he claims it also, it makes it rain, right? That he's seen cases where he's got rain and his neighbor didn't. And so maybe the plants are doing something to cause it to rain. And so maybe these trees and this grass and stuff like that is one of the reasons why we get so much rain down here. And if the rest of the country did the same thing, well, I can't really say that because the Gulf, you know, we have the weather currents from the Gulf. The warm air comes from the south and it meets the cold air from the north. But regardless, I can't help but wonder if you could improve the situation by, you know, planting hundreds of thousands of square miles of trees in Arizona. And the only way you can do that is if you raise the water level beyond what's natural. You know, I don't know. All right, guys, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.